everyone. Welcome. Okay. Today, today I'm I'm gonna take us into some difficult material. Um, there are years when I don't feel like looking at the Akeda, at the Binding of Isaac story. There are years where it's just like, I mean, it's such a hallmark story that we read it all the time. In fact, in our prayers, many of us say it every single day, recite the Binding of Isaac. And so, you don't want to do it every year, you know, thinking about what to teach, what to write. And then also, it's just, it's one of our hallmark stories, but we've never really figured it out. It's sort of impossible. It's an impossible story because God makes an impossible demand. It demands Isaac, demands Abraham sacrifice his son Isaac. And that's, I mean, I think we have a sense like that's like what is that supposed to represent? Why is God doing that? I think we have a sense that this story is on some level meant to horrify us. There are debates over whether Abraham was really supposed to do it, or really maybe she even should have resisted doing it. And some people would say, no, that's the ancient world and that was expected. But I do think on some level, everybody would acknowledge that this story is supposed to sort of startle us, to chill us. And, the Torah goes on later to say you shouldn't sacrifice your children to Moloch, right? That was the way that you worshipped some gods back in the day. And so the Torah seems to be pushing it. I mean, in the end, Isaac is not sacrificed. So there's a happy ending, but it's a difficult story. There's lots of ways to take a look at this story, lots of ways that we have looked at this story throughout the ages as we try unsuccessfully to kind of figure it out. But this week, I really felt like, I said, some years I don't feel like trying to tackle it. But this year, I did feel like trying to tackle it because I wanted to be, because the world feels so dark right now. The state of our people is so difficult at the moment that it felt right somehow to look at a difficult story of sacrifice and anguish and terror. So I want to take a look at it and, not to apply it directly to what's going on. It's not my style anyway, whether it would be wise or not. That's not what I intend to do. But I will say that what I tend to do is open up the Mikrot Gedolot, the book of commentaries, right? And I just wanted to look around and see what people, maybe refresh my memory, maybe find something new, some new angle on this story. And I have to say, I didn't get past the first Rashi. That is the first Rashi, our most famous commentator, the first Rashi on the Akeda, the Binding of Isaac, is so chilling and so difficult. And it is especially difficult to read in light of what's going on. So we'll have that awareness, in our minds when we come to it. But it feels important somehow. It feels like this is difficult stuff that requires some processing. Everything feels too soon to process, in like in real terms. This is what I think about what's going on. This is what should be done. I definitely don't feel there, but there are some themes that are just screaming at us from the Torah that I think it's our sort of duty as a people to look at, to think about, to grapple with. Okay, so let's just get into it then. Let's say a blessing, and we'll take a look at the binding of Isaac, and that first Rashi, and see where we get. Okay. Do I have any announcements to make? Oh, if you're in LA tonight on the east side, we're gonna have Temple Beth Israel of Highland Park and Eagle Rock. We're gonna have like a Beit Midrash. Beit Midrash is like the study hall, and it's like the most sacred place, most sacred Jewish place, if you ask me. And as part of my new work, I'm hoping to really grow Beit Midrash culture here in Los Angeles. So join us. You can find that on my Facebook page, a link to that, or at hadar.org/west. W. Here, I'll put that in the hadar.org/west. This is where you can find out information. Maybe Vera, you can make that linkable. Okay, all right. Let's say a blessing. We'll get into it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Just ask God to, to allow us to see things in the Torah that that might help guide our way forward. Okay, let's take a look. We are there's a famous opening here, and that's where we're going to begin at the beginning. It's chapter 22 of Genesis. That's the last chapter in Parshat Vayeira. First chapter in Parshat Vayeira has an announcement that Sarah will give birth in a year's time, and that seems crazy to Sarah and Abraham, who are 89 and 99, and so this miraculous birth is announced, and that's part of the framing that that's the beginning of the Parsha. And by the end of the Parsha, it says this child was born and will now be snatched back, right? So it adds to the sense of tragedy here that it's a miracle stolen back. Okay, so here is the source sheet that we're going to look at today. And what we're going to do, I said I didn't get really past the first Rashi, and what that should tell you is I didn't get past the first line. So I read the first line, looked over Rashi's commentary, and just sort of startled and stayed with that as I prepared for this class. So let's take a look now at the first line here of the binding of Isaac. And we're gonna try and ask the question that Rashi is asking. We're trying to figure out what's to use the classic phrasing, what's bothering Rashi? What is it that Rashi thinks we need to figure out in this first verse here? So let's take a look. Okay, here we are. The beginning of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. If there is a classic passage in the Torah, this surely is one. And we, as I said, in our liturgy, recite it. Many of us recite it every day. Okay. Vayi achar dvarim ha'ele, and it was after these things, v'ha'Elohim nisa et Avraham, that God put Abraham to the test, tested Abraham. Okay, this is the word for test, nisa. Vayomer elav Avraham, vayomer hineni. He said to him, Abraham, and Abraham answered, here I am, hineni. And then here's the test. Vayomer kachna et bincha et yechidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak v'lech lecha el eretz hamoria. Take your son, your only one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as an offering on one of the mountains that I will point out to you. Okay. All right. There's then there's another 17 verses in the story, and as a kind of a literary study, we could a different year we could just sort of move slowly through them, because they are this classic tale is told in just 19 verses, and that tells you that there's a lot going on and a lot not going on in those 19 verses. So we could go further, but I just want to stop us here at this line. And it was after these things that God put Abraham to the test, saying to him, Abraham, and he answered, here I am. Now, just to get our Parsha brains working, like how do we study the commentaries, or how do we study the Torah? How do the commentaries teach us how to study the Torah? Let's ask the question, what's bothering us with this verse? What needs solving in this verse? What is strange in this verse? You can either type it into the chat, or if someone wants to offer it, I just want us to think about it. So what's bothering us with this first verse? And it was after these things that God put Abraham to the test, saying to him, Abraham, and Abraham answered, here I am. What's bothering us? God is testing Abraham, says Joe. Good. That is one of the questions. What God's tested? Why does God have to test Abraham? That's good. That is a question. But Tori and Ken take me to Rashi's question, which is an even prior question, which is what things? After what things? It begins Vayhi achar dvarim ha'ele, right? That seems very clearly referring backwards. It was after these things. It was after these things. What things? Because Joe's question, why was Abraham put to the test, seems like it's got to be related to this. Is it really just anyway, next chapter in the story? Is it we don't read the Torah there's just throwaway lines? So when it says, and it was after these things, which is not the way every chapter in the Torah starts, we got to ask, what are these things? Okay, good. I see other questions coming in. So if we're good readers careful readers of the Torah, we could ask lots of questions. Payam saying, what's Hineni? Why does it say, here I am? What is that? What kind of response? So lots of questions coming in, but we're going to take you to Rashi here, who is clearly asking the same question that Tori and Ken were asking. And you can tell, and this is just, again, good Rashi literacy here, you can tell because of what's called the Dibur HaMatchil, the opening words. Rashi always cites words from the Torah as the kind of bolded words that he's going to comment on. And that tells you where Rashi's focus is. And you can see here that Rashi's focus is exactly on these words. Here's Rashi. Achara dvarim ha'ele, and it was after these things. Okay, so that's what Rashi is concerned with. So let's try to figure out what were the things, and then we'll try to get to to Joe's question. What was the test? Why was there a test at all? What things prompted a test? And that'll come up in Rashi as well. Now, I just have to, this is really difficult. The story is really difficult, obviously, and the Rashi is really, really difficult. There's difficult material here. This is painful material that we're going to be looking at today. So that's a warning, and I'm not, we'll sort of wrestle our way through it. I'm not coming in here with a ta-da, this is what you all need to know about this Rashi. We'll see where we get with it. But let's take a look. Rashi has two answers. Now, again, methodological point here. When we're reading Rashi, and Rashi gives us two answers, Rashi doesn't usually do that. As a general rule, Rashi gives us one answer that is selected from the whole corpus of midrashic material, Talmudic midrashic, rabbinic material of the days of the rabbi, the days of the Talmud and the Midrash. Rashi has read all that stuff, and he selects through, and he gives you one answer that just sort of fits right in and answers the question. The rabbis may have given 10 answers, And indeed they did here. But Rashi usually picks one, the one that he thinks is best or solves the problem in the verse the best. We could go on a tangent on what solves the verse the best, but for now, Rashi, the point is Rashi picks one answer, and here Rashi gives us two, and when Rashi gives us two answers, we always have to ask why? What was the need for both? It seems that either or of these answers was insufficient, or it seems that each of these answers speaks to a certain point and not to another. Okay, so Rashi takes his answers from the Talmud in Sanhedrin, Masechet Sanhedrin, which, as I said, gives a bunch of different answers to the question, what things? Okay. Last clarifying point before we head back into Rashi. The word dvarim, achar dvarim eile, can mean things. It also can mean words. These words, eile had dvarim, these words that God spoke on Mount Sinai. Right? Or Eila Hadvarim, these words that Moses spoke, things, matters, words, they're all contained by this word in Hebrew, davar. Okay? So that'll be important because Rashi will play on that a little bit. It won't just be after these things, but after these words that were spoken. What words were spoken? Okay. And we're going to do two different directions here. Okay? So answer number one. Okay. Yeshmi Rabotenu, some of our rabbis say, and then here's where they say it in Sanhedrin 89b. Some of our rabbis say that it means after the words of Satan. This is like quite an opening, right? And if you didn't know that we had Satan in this tradition and you were happy about that, well, too bad. We do have Satan in this tradition. In fact, we came up with Satan. Okay, we'll get there. What is Satan to us? It's not exactly the devil, but it's not good either. Some of our rabbis say that it means after the words of Satan, and here's the word in Hebrew, Satan, who denounced Abraham, saying, in all the feasting which Abraham prepared, not a single bull nor a single ram did he bring as a sacrifice to you. Can you believe that? All the feasting that Abraham prepared, he didn't make one offering to God. God replied to him, he did it all for his son. You're right. Like, he didn't do it for me. He did it for his son. He was celebrating his son. He didn't thank me. Yet, if I were to bid him, sacrifice him to me, he would not refuse. Okay. All right. So this is, like, you can see we're heading into difficult material here. Satan, and Satan testing, to daring God to test Abraham. Okay. First thing we need to do before we really get into this, really chew on it, first thing we need to do is figure out, what is Satan talking about? What does he mean at all this feasting that Abraham did? Anyone know, what is he referring to? And he didn't even sacrifice one offering. He didn't make one offering. And all this feasting, how come he didn't offer anything to you, God? What feast is Satan talking about? Anyone know? Leah knows. Leah Matsui.
Yeah, Isaac is 3 years old, and it's a festival where he's weaned and celebrated.
Excellent. That's exactly right. There was in the very last chapter a big, so this is, now we're starting to answer the question. Achar dvarim eile, after these things, although it's in this case after these words which Satan spoke to God, but in the very last chapter, Isaac is miraculously born after that had been announced, and we're told Abraham makes a great feast. Let's take a look at it. It's on our source sheet here, but Leah's exactly right. This is what Satan is referring to. The child grew up, right? Was weaned, got to the point where he was no longer nursing. And Abraham held a great feast. And mishteh has like the feeling of a party, like a drinking feast, on the day that Isaac was weaned. Okay, that's the feast, and hooray, everybody's celebrating Isaac. But Satan says, you look at this. God, you did a miracle for Abraham, and he just like ate food and celebrated his own life, and he didn't even think to give thanks to you. He didn't even think about it. Can you believe that? Okay. And God's response is to say, oh, no, don't you think my servant Abraham isn't willing to do things for me? He'd sacrifice his son for me. Whoa. Where did that come up as a possibility? But Satan seems to have known how to kind of goad God into it. Okay. There's one more. So that's the issue. Now, I should stop here. I've been talking for a while, and I should stop here and say, so what's going on? Why would Satan want to goad God into it? What's the theology here? It's such difficult theology. But we must also mention, because this reference takes us there, and I think I saw it in the chat. Yeah, I see it in the chat. Ken says, echoes of Job. Echoes of Job. And so that's right. Where does Satan come from? The figure Satan. It comes from the book of Job. And it doesn't mean the devil. It literally means the adversary. The adversary, the one who is arguing against, and seems to play into an idea that we have that like comes up a lot in rabbinic literature, that the angels are always a little suspicious of us, not sure whether we deserve our status in the world. The angels, the heavenly tribunal, their voices, divine voices that are against, they're making the case against us. We're not worthy of God's favor. And so Satan is like the adversary, the prosecutor is like one way to think of what Satan is. And there is also reason to think that Satan in our tradition is an angel, a fallen angel, right? This is where like the kind of the devil mythology kind of comes from. But is an angel. Why would we call Satan an angel? Because it's not clear what Satan is, but the opening story of Job, which we'll look at now, and then we'll open the conversation. The opening story of Job has this strange scene taking place in the heavens, and listen to how similar this scene sounds to the conversation that Rashi just gave us between Satan and God. Here's another conversation between Satan and God, and it's at the beginning of the book of Job, okay? And with that, once we do that, we'll have Rashi's first answer, and then we'll have to wrestle with it. It's obviously, it's already difficult. We were in one of the most difficult chapters in the Torah, and now we're taken to one of the most difficult books in the Tanakh, the book of Job, which deals with the question, why do the righteous suffer? Okay. So here we are in the book of Job. One day, book of Job opens with like Job was a righteous and pure and righteous man, and he feared God. And one day, the divine beings. Now, this is the mysterious part. Elohim, the children of God. That phrase appears sometimes in our Bible, and we're never quite sure what it means, but they don't seem like humans, so maybe they're angels or whatever the Tanakh's version of kind of lesser divine beings might be. One day, the children of God came and presented themselves before the Eternal, and the Satan came amongst them. And notice that it isn't Satan like a name, it's the Satan, HaSatan. Okay. The Eternal said to the Satan, "Where have you been?" Which is a strange question. Where did you come from? It can be read in lots of different ways. Me'ayin tavo. Where do you come from? Or where will you come from? Okay, the Satan answered the Eternal, "I've been roaming all over the earth." Oh, this is just like, we could spend our whole class on this line. What does that mean? Where did you come from? I've been roaming all over the earth. We could spend our whole, this is enough to wonder about for an hour. But let's make the connection to our scene. The Eternal said to the Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? Have you noticed have you placed your heart's notice on my servant Job. There is no one like him on earth, a pure and upright man who fears God and shuns evil. God is bragging about how great Job is. Okay. And Satan doesn't seem to like that, or at least is ready to push back. The Satan answered the Eternal, does Job not have good reason to fear God? Why, it is you who have fenced him round, him and his household and all that he has. You have blessed his efforts so that his possessions spread out in the land. You've given Job everything. He has a nice and easy life. But lay your hand upon all that he has, and he will surely blaspheme you to your face. If you just make him suffer a little, he won't be your loyal servant. Just try it. You think he's such a good and righteous man? When people suffer, they will curse God. The loyalty you have is only a product of the ease of their lives. And the Eternal replied to the Satan, see, all that he has is in your power. Okay, do what you want to him. Only do not lay a hand on him, but don't kill him. You can do anything short of killing him. And the Satan departed from the presence of the Eternal. And you can do anything short of killing him. Well, the Satan kills his entire family instead, and devastates him with bodily afflictions, but doesn't kill him, but makes him suffer unimaginable suffering. Okay, all right. So here we go. Let's try to figure out where we're at here. We had a question. What was it that caused God to test Abraham? Why is the binding of Isaac a story in the Torah at all? What is it that provoked God to test Abraham? The first answer that Rashi gave is that Satan came along and said, look, Abraham's not sacrificing to you. He only thinks of himself. He only thinks of his own good. He doesn't thank God. Right? Okay, so that's an answer, and it's worthy of our processing, but there's just no way when you put that answer in the mouth of Satan that doesn't remind us of another kind of great scene in our Tanakh's theology, which is the conversation between God and the adversary who wants to make the case that if we suffer, we won't be loyal to God. Okay, so let's try to take all of that information back to the binding of Isaac. What is Rashi saying about the test? What is it that God needs to test? Or what is it that Satan has, you hate to say this, but almost like tricked God or goaded God into doing? What's this answer, this first answer that Rashi gives? What is this about that maybe the thing that provoked God into asking Abraham to sacrifice his son is that Abraham reveled in his own joys and didn't thank God? Okay, all right. Let's start there. What is that answer? How do you make sense of that answer? Does it make sense as an answer either from your reading of the Torah or your understanding of rabbinic theology? What are we being offered here? Let's see if we have a few comments. Let's try Matt Silverstein.
I'm not sure I'm on this, but it seems that it fits in rabbinic in that it's trying to understand what sacrifice is and the role it plays. I think this story is a bridge between when there was human sacrifice and then there wasn't, and it's telling us that. But I think this answer from Satan is, why aren't they giving you? And so it's leading us to, because we are supposed to be giving. We are supposed to be sacrificing. So I see it fitting there, trying to bridge that.
Yeah.
This answer is trying to bridge. Now I can say it. Now I've used enough words that I can say my thought. I think this answer is bridging that connection between an old world, past world where there was human sacrifice, the Torah, which is teaching us it, and the new world where there is just animals. So
great.
Okay.
Matt, you're like me. You like talk your way into your thought. I do that. I do that too. But Matt talks his way into a very, I think, a kind of classical approach, and in some ways a very clean approach. That is to say, there's a certain clear logic to it. One way to approach the Binding of Isaac story is that, as I said, it's just like disorienting, horrifying. But another way to approach it is, no, there was child sacrifice in the ancient world, and that's just a part of the landscape. There's nothing Abraham would have been surprised about at the idea that some gods, maybe his God, required it. And this story is essentially about snapping that, the God demanding it, but then relinquishing that demand, and bringing us into a world where, oh, there's a new idea where God, the greatest God of all, actually doesn't require your children. And if that is the case, if we can kind of, so that's the framework that Matt offers us. And if that is the case, well, then we can just take the theology of child sacrifice seriously. It horrifies us, but once upon a time, the idea was, what are you willing to, how devoted are you to God? Would you give anything to God? What is the most precious thing? Your child. So you would sacrifice, your bull, your ox, your produce, and eventually that is the ultimate sacrifice. You would sacrifice your child. And that's just the conversation here that Satan is having with God. Look, Abraham is not devoted enough to you, doesn't sacrifice enough to you, doesn't give enough, isn't thankful enough. And God just says, no, he would do the absolute maximum, which is a known thing, which is sacrifice his child. And I'll show you he will do it. Turns out God doesn't actually want him to do it, but it's a testament to the classic notion that you sacrifice the thing that is most important to you, whatever that is, right? And certainly your child is for the obvious answer. Okay. All right, a couple more answers from Richard.
So it feels to me like it doesn't fit theologically with the antecedents in this Parsha. And when you think about the fine moral argument between Avraham and God with regard to the people of Sodom, and God says, can I actually kill the people of Sodom without talking to Avraham about it? That God, or also the God who, for Ishmael under the bush, when the angels are saying, you're going to save this guy who's going to kill the Israelites in the future, and he says, Ba'asher Husham, I judge him here. That God to be goaded into this horrific request by the Satan just doesn't make sense. It seems weird.
Yeah, great. I want to leave Richard's point to stand as it is, because I think that's excellent parshanut and just analysis of the storyline here that we can see, and we can contrast to God's role and appearance in other places, but easily enough in the opening of this week's Parsha, when God seems to be in dialogue and willing to relent and have some sense of the innocent and the okay. So I'll leave Richard's point. I will just say, in some ways, I might take a different. Richard ends by saying, so it doesn't seem like that God could be goaded into this by the Satan. And I guess I was about to think just the opposite, which is, oh, that's why Rashi needed the figure. Well, that's why the Gemara needs the figure of the Satan, because you're right. This God doesn't seem like the God that would do this. That's part of what's so shocking. So though, it starts to feel to us a little like a fable when you have and God got tricked into that there's something silly about that notion. But maybe the parable is meant to do exactly that, which is say some other voice has to be in the mix here. We have to imagine God as being pulled in other directions because the God we know wouldn't do that. Okay, so like there's a different way to slice it, but your point stands. Let's take one more comment from Tori.
So I don't think it was I don't find this a satisfactory answer because we know what happens in the story. It's not like we're pausing right beforehand and then we're going to see how it plays out. But because Rashi at this point knows the entirety of Torah, Rashi also knows that Abraham doesn't sacrifice Isaac. And with knowing that, the Satan is then correct. Like, I actually don't think that gives pardon, like that God giving pardon shows more power. But if the Satan is saying that, oh, he's not sacrificing, and so God says, well, he'll sacrifice his most privileged thing for me, but he doesn't wind up doing it. So then that actually, in a way, gives more power to the Satan to be correct. And I think it could be interpreted that way. So this is not a satisfactory answer.
Right. Abraham doesn't the only way to make sense of Abraham having passed the test is to say, that's why the scene, I'm speaking sort of back to, I mean, I hear what the line you're thinking along, and I guess I'm sort of responding, well, I guess that's why Abraham has to get to the point where he's holding the knife in the air. Because there has to be some sense that, no, Abraham passed the test by being willing to do it. And being willing to do it. But, right, Tori is right in the sense that, it's certainly not as simple as God saying, he'll do it, watch him kill his kids. See, he did it. Yeah, all right. God wins again because people are willing to kill their kids for me. Like, it doesn't go that way. So, there's a kind of hanging threat. But as I said, as a matter of storyline, the idea is that Abraham gets to the point and has proven just by being willing. Now, with that said, let me make a few more connections here, and I'm certainly not the first to make them. I mean, Rashi, the Talmud is already making them, but Judy Klitzner, who recently came and taught at IKAR, and taught, I think, on this story at least one time, but writes about it in various places. But she has a book called Subversive Sequels, which is very good. I recommend. But she draws the lines of textual connection between the story of Job and the binding of Isaac, and there are lots. You may have already noticed. I'm just going to make two of them right now. There's lots of material that connects the two, but let's just highlight some of the obvious ones. One is that Job is described as someone who fears God. Okay, and that's the whole point of the Abraham story, is that Abraham, now I know that you fear God. Okay, that seems to have been the test. Same language here. Yireh Elokim. You fear God. Okay. There is also, now that we're here. Okay, so this is the moment that I was just Tori and I were just sort of in dialogue around. Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. Then an angel of the eternal called to him from heaven. So this is also an interesting thing. An angel of the eternal called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, here I am. Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything, because now I know that you fear God. Now I know that you fear God, since you've not withheld your son, your favored one, your favored one from me. Okay, why is that important or interesting? Because there's a connection there. The to see if you fear God, you will be tested, but also maybe the Satan is an angel of God who, like, you can see how there's now another parallel. Well, is it the angel of God who, well, let's read all this midrash back through the book of Job back into the binding of Isaac. It's like God's fine with Abraham, but other forces like other lesser entities are questioning Abraham's loyalty or devotion or fear, or Job's. And so we don't have enough time to go too deep into this, but you can see how the Sforno reads it this way, for example, that the angel who comes down, it's the angel saying, oh, now I get it. You're willing to do this. It's okay. It's It's okay, you don't have to do it. As if the angel was the one that was, because it was God that tested Abraham, but it's an angel of God that comes down and stops him. What's going on there? That's, again, a class for another time. I mean, there's just like, you could spend a whole year of classes on the binding of Isaac, to be sure. But you can see there's lots of little threads that connect these two stories. And in that sense, and I think Judy Klitzner, really one of the great Torah teachers around, suggests by making all these connections that the book of Job is a kind of a commentary on the binding of Isaac. Right? So part of what we see here is that the later books of Tanakh themselves act as a kind of midrash on the stories in the Torah, right? And we're always wondering about the dating of different books of Tanakh, but at least as they're laid out, I'm just making, like, as they're laid out, the later can offer commentary on the earlier. Okay. I want to take us to the second answer now. Okay. That first answer is a doozy, to be sure. We're talking about Satan. We're talking about God being goaded into testing Abraham. Like, what is this? What is this reality that we're living in? And in various ways, we've heard folks really sort of puzzled or suspicious of the answer that Rashi has given us. And if you feel that way, that's an appropriate feeling, because remember, Rashi's going to give another answer. So even Rashi has a sense, maybe not this first answer, but I have to tell you, the second answer is more difficult in this moment. And I say it with like a certain amount of trepidation to even look at this story, though it's this week's Parsha. So it is like, it's right there in front of us. But the next answer is, I read it this week and I just felt like, oh my gosh, it just sort of wrecked me. It wrecked me. And I certainly haven't gotten to the bottom of it, but let's take a look at this next answer, which imagines a totally different after these things. What were the things? What happened to create this scene in which God's testing Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his son? And here's the second answer. Okay, we'll go back up now. Let's go back up to Rashi. Here we are. Okay, some of our rabbis say that it was the Satan. Others say it means after the words of Ishmael. Achar dvarav shel Yishmael, who boasted to Isaac that he had been circumcised when he was 13 years old without resisting. Okay, that's the story when circumcision is given to Abraham. At that point, Ishmael is already 13 years old, and Abraham circumcises his son Ishmael. So Ishmael's saying, "Look, I got circumcised when I was 13. That I'm the real hero, and I let it happen. I didn't resist." Okay. In the Talmud, this conversation is longer. It's like, I got circumcised when I was 13, and then Isaac says, "Well, I was only 8." And then Ishmael says, "Yeah, well, I could have resisted and I didn't." It's a little longer, the back and forth, but Rashi truncates it for us. And Isaac replied to him, "You think to intimidate me by mentioning the loss of one limb?" And the limb here is a little bit of a funny phrase, the loss of one limb. If the Holy Blessed One were to tell me, there's a little typo here. If the Holy Blessed One were to tell me, sacrifice your whole self to me, I would not refuse. Okay, I'm just going to read that again. There's a lot to process here. Others say that it means after the words of Ishmael, who boasted to Isaac that he had been circumcised when he was 13 years old without resisting. And Isaac replied to him, "You think to intimidate me by mentioning the loss of one limb? If the Holy Blessed One were to tell me, sacrifice your whole self to me, I would not refuse." And in one version of this story, God hears that and says, "Oh, is that right? Well, the time has come. The time has come now for you to make good on that declaration, Isaac." Okay. All right. So, and again, okay. And if the first answer took us to the book of Job, this answer, where does this answer take us? Where does it take us? Right back where we were. Right back where we were. We've already got this source on the page. And so I went back and I looked at this source. It's the great feast. It's Isaac being born. And I read it just with a broken heart this week. Take a look at this scene here. It's worth this is this week's Parsha, and it's worth our thinking about. The child grew up and was weaned. That's Isaac. And Abraham held a great fast on the day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham playing around. And we're not sure what he was doing here, playing around. Okay. I'm not sure, but there he was playing around, and she flies into a rage. She said to Abraham, cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Who's this? Ishmael, whose mother is Hagar, who is Abraham's first son. He had a first son with his maidservant Hagar at the behest of Sarah at the time. But now Sarah has her own son and is not happy with Ishmael around, maybe mocking. I mean, this is where the idea, oh, look, he was mocking Isaac. He was mocking Isaac. He was mocking Isaac. And so he said, look, I was 13 years old, and I'm a better son than you. I'm a better inheritor of the covenant than you. And she said, cast out that slave woman and her son, for that son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. And the matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. Vayeira hadavar me'od b'nei Avraham al odot b'no. But God said, and by the way, this is a little vague. Which son of his? Probably Ishmael, but also Isaac. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your maidservant. Whatever Sarah tells you to do, do as she says, for it is Isaac who will be named as your seed. But as for the son of the maidservant, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed also. Early the next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba, for all we know, to die. And then it turns out she doesn't die. And why, by the way? Because an angel of God comes down. Right? So there's a connection there too, but that's not for today. For today, the question is, what's this answer of Rashi's doing here? Why this other answer of Rashi's? What is going on here where Rashi says maybe what happened to prompt the binding of Isaac, the test here, is that Isaac and Ishmael were fighting over who was the true inheritor of the covenant, who was willing to sacrifice more, who was willing to endure more pain. And I must say, right, I think you understand that the reason that I am so unnerved by all of this is that we see ourselves as the descendants of Isaac, and Muslims see themselves as the descendants of Ishmael. So, this idea that there'll be these two nations, I mean, in a sense, well, okay, that happened. Okay, and so I'm trying to sort of sift my way through all of this machismo, all of this like martyrdom, all of this claim to the covenant, to being the true son of Abraham, right? Okay. So I can all of that is like screaming at me, but I'm just trying to focus on answering the Rashi question. Why does Rashi bring this answer, and how does this answer explain the binding of Isaac? Okay, let's start with Payam.
I mean, the problem with the binding of Isaac is Isaac, right? He's not like a 2-year-old kid. I think he's like, what, 13 or 16 or, and the entire story, he doesn't do anything. So the question Rashi's trying to answer is that why is he so placid? Why doesn't Isaac do anything. And I think on top of that, it's that Isaac never comes down from the mountain, right? So it's like he's answering the second part of the question too. It's like, I think Isaac sort of failed the test, like that's the reason he has to, I mean, they say he goes up to heaven and he has to study, and there's midrashes on that as well.
Yeah. I'm going to like those are all intriguing. I'm gonna like leave aside some of those, like, where does this all go? And I'm just gonna take Payam's, because those are interesting, but we don't have a lot of time. I just want to take Payam's first point, because I think it's a very good one, that part of what this answer does is it allows us to understand Isaac as the one who is being tested. Now, as a matter of like kind of parshanut here, there's a problem with that answer, because it says that God tested Abraham, okay, through Isaac, but Isaac goes and becomes, like, so Payam points out, even in the story, Isaac is passive, willing, seemingly. That's interesting, and this sort of accounts for that. But in the tradition, Isaac is, just look at your High Holidays liturgy. Isaac is always described as the one who was willing to sacrifice himself. That becomes who Isaac was. I put myself on the altar. And like, while that's not technically true, it seems like maybe there's some way to think of Isaac as just being called on to sacrifice himself, and this answer sets that up for us. Okay, so that's really good. In one way, it's strong because it accounts for Isaac's role in the previous scene, and in this scene, you don't have to go to the book of Job and the figure of the Satan. You're dealing with like parts of this story. But on the other hand, that's a funny thing to say, that this essentially becomes about God testing Isaac. All right. Let's hear from a couple more folks. Ron Fursky.
Yeah, my mind was wandering here, and I was listening to the two stories, one of the Akedah and one of sending Ishmael off into the desert, and I'm thinking of the two goats, one that gets sacrificed and the other one that goes to Azazel, both to die, and in this case, neither one dies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's you said so quickly. You said, you pointed us to so many of the tensions in this story that I think, just in the plain reading of this scene, let's just take a look at it again. We hear the tension that Ron is laying out for us, where on the one hand, it seems like it's one or the other. Only one can, was a Highlander. Only one will survive in the end, But then, wait a minute, that's not true. It's not true. They both are said to be the fathers of great nations. The Torah, let's not forget, the Torah names Ishmael as the father of a mighty nation, right? It's like, Ishmael, and more, I think more importantly than what the Torah thinks about Ishmael, which, we could debate, is just what Abraham thinks. I mean, like, just look at this again here. Let's just look again at Abraham here. She said to Abraham, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." And the matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. No way. Like, I can't cast my son out. And God says, no, you have to listen to Sarah. You have to listen to Sarah. And in listening to Sarah, he essentially dooms his first son to death. Okay? Now, I hope you can hear the way in which that drama sets us up for the binding of Isaac, in the sense that we realize now Abraham has already sacrificed a son and resisted, but was told by God, no, just do it. Trust me. Right? So there's a little more, like, now we have part of the reason there are some flaws with this answer, right? It's not like it's about God testing Isaac, but it also there's something about this answer that sets us up. The previous scene sets us up for this. It isn't just about Isaac. It's like Abraham is being tested again and again and again with giving up. When God says to him, "Et yechidcha, your only son," it's not his only son. What about Ishmael? But the answer to that might be, well, it's his only one left. Okay? But where I want to just leave us today is with this last answer of Rashi's, that actually the Akedah is some response to all of the terror of the binding of Isaac, is somehow in response to some tension between Isaac and Ishmael, the two potential inheritors of the covenant, who are almost fighting with each other over who can sacrifice more to prove that they are the true inheritor of the covenant. And that image to me just feels, in this moment, so heartbreaking, so chilling. And it reminds me, and I don't, as I promised, I don't have any political thing to take away from that. That's, God forbid, not the role that I hope to play here. But I do feel like, as a matter of Torah, it's really important to remember that, and it's hard right now, but it's important to remember that we are Ishmael and Bnei Ishmael and Bnei Yitzchak. We're actually family. And it just occurred to me that of all the people who are broken now in the midst of all of this tragedy that has occurred, no one would be more brokenhearted than Abraham. Like these are his children, and I just so we're not ending in total devastation. There's one other line that I think it's so important for us to remember, and it's going to take us a long time to figure out how to be in this place. But there is this, what is the last we hear of Ishmael in the Torah? That when Abraham died, breathing his last at a good, ripe old age and contented, he was gathered to his kin, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him. V'yikveru oto Yitzchak v'Ishmael. Like, that's where that story ends in the Torah, is that the two of them are together burying their father, honoring their father, together in mourning their shared heritage. And and that's that image we have to hold on to. We have to figure out how to hold on, because like somewhere in all of this is a fact that we have to grapple with, which is that we are all related, and that just makes it worse, but it's important to remember. So I'll leave it there, and I wish you a good Shabbos, and we will resume next week.